This week on To the Contrary, new numbers on white suburban women and how they will vote in the upcoming presidential election. We speak with Mercedes Viana Schlapp from the Trump re-election campaign. And our panelists weigh in on the latest on the women's vote 2020. Welcome to the Contrary, a weekly discussion of news and social trends from diverse perspectives. Up first, a talk with Mercedes Viana Schlapp. She's a conservative woman thought leader. She is now with the Trump re-election campaign. Before that, she was strategic communications director at the Trump White House. And way before that, she was a regular To the Contrary panelist. Mercy, it's great to see you. How are you?
It's great to see you too. I have to say, I always have great memories of To the Contrary and being on your show for so many years.
Well, we miss you, and glad you have gotten to a place where you always wanted to be, which is now with the Trump campaign and before strategic communications in the White House. So, big gap with women. You're on, with women voters, I should say, you're on a bus tour, on and off a bus tour for women for the Trump campaign. How do you close that gap?
Sure. And Bonnie, you should come with us. It's a big pink bus, let me tell you. And we are going to all the different battleground states. I have been to Arizona, Wisconsin, Iowa, New Hampshire, Maine, Pennsylvania. I'm headed to Florida next week. And I think one of the common threads I see throughout in these battleground states is the fact that these field offices, this is where the volunteers all come together. This is where they're making calls, planning to knock on doors. Many of them they're run by women. And it's these women who are on the ground who are talking about the president's record and what he has accomplished to build a strong economy, to combat coronavirus, which we know has been, just a global pandemic that's impacted all of our lives, especially women, and as well as ensure that we're able to stay strong in the next 4 years. And I think for these women, what I have found encouraging and inspiring is the fact that it's a story that's untold. People don't talk about these women filled with field offices filled with women, led by women, basically the ones that are leading the efforts on this campaign and truly focused on what the president's been able to accomplish and why they're focused on getting the president reelected.
But the polls do show, in fact, very recent polls show that women, white women, suburban women, even some traditionally Republican women, are most concerned about his handling of the COVID pandemic, that they don't see him as, at the beginning, denial. It just came out in a book recently that he said that he knew he was spewing misinformation. You're in charge of responding to that and telling women what are you telling them?
So we break through the liberal media outlets who are telling their opinions and obviously advocating for the other side because they are no fans of President Trump, as you know. But at the same time, we're also talking about the fact that it was the president back in January where he basically said we gotta restrict travel to China. This is when Joe Biden was saying that was a xenophobic action. That's when the Democrats were really focused on the impeachment hoax. Secondly, the president immediately then declared COVID as a public health emergency, taking the necessary steps needed to make sure that the states had funding and also ensuring that building the stockpile needed to make sure that they had the resources for these different states. So this is obviously something the president responded as we saw Dr. Fauci talk about this past week, where he himself said there was no discrepancy. We would give the advice to the president, us, the coronavirus task force, and he would go out to the public and share exactly what we would say. And so I think that it's very clear.
Let me pretend for a moment. I'm a woman voter meeting you on your bus tour. And I just read about Bob Woodward's book, where back in February, the president was denying it was a problem.
Never denied it, Bonnie. Never denied it.
Now we have over almost 200, or climbing towards 200,000 Americans who've died from the virus. And then at first he was saying, don't wear a mask, it's a hoax. Now
never
he's
called it a
on
hoax,
board.
Bonnie. He never called it a hoax.
But wait a minute. But even Fox News was, you can say liberal media, Mercy, but Fox News was reporting some of this. So what do you tell me? What do you say to me to convince me that that's not how he feels?
Well,
when you've seen him say, go and don't wear a mask.
Well, first of all, let's start by saying that there was plenty of media outlets that, with the information of saying, don't wear a mask, doctors saying wear a mask. There was a lot going on in the beginning trying to sort through the information. And the president, again, took the advice of the medical experts like Dr. Fauci. And I can tell you, I have friends of mine who, for example, they're not particularly fond of the president. I call them my focus group. These are my high school girls I went to school with in Miami. But they trust Dr. Fauci.
Are they all they're Republicans, right?
It's a mix, Republicans and Democrats. And so, but they trust Dr. Fauci. So if you're one of those Democrats and you say, well, I trust Dr. Fauci more, I would say, well, Dr. Fauci just made it very clear that his quotes were taken out of context in the Woodward book, that also that all the information that he had shared with the president then took directly to the American people. And there was that transparent conversation happening. It was the goal of the president to make sure that there was a sense of calmness, that we do not create this awful panic. Let us remember that it was the World Health Organization who lied, who basically aligned themselves with the Chinese, gave us misinformation when it came to how deadly this pandemic was. And what did President Trump do? He literally pulled the taxpayer funding from WHO. Guess what Joe Biden wants to do? He wants to reward them by giving back taxpayer funding to an organization that we know gave us bad information from day one. It is very clear that the president took actions early on, travel restrictions, declaring it a public health emergency, basically motivating, getting a whole government approach to ensure that we have the resources we need to get it to the state and local governments to ensure that it wasn't going to be 2 million people dying, that we can find a way to reduce the number of fatalities, while at the same time knowing that he focused since February on a vaccine development.
But because you have limited time, so I want to move on to two other topics. One is race relations in America. That's the second. A recent poll showed women, particularly white suburban women, most concerned first about his handling of the COVID virus and why so many people have died. Secondly, concerned about race relations being in about the worst state that they have been in since the 1960s, with police shooting fire hoses at demonstrators, etc. Now we have a president who has said that the alt-right includes some good people. He just spoke at a QAnon. Wait. He just spoke at a QAnon rally. These are extremists.
He didn't speak at a QAnon rally. Bonnie, where are you getting? I'm Bonnie. I love you. But
I love you.
The information you're providing is inaccurate. If you go back to the president's comments on Charlottesville, he condemned the white supremacists. He condemned the far-right militia groups. He never said they were fine people. That is a talking point from the left. Is what Joe Biden.
No, I saw him say. Wait. Let me
provide you with that transcript.
Let me finish. He did say there are good people on both sides.
He did not say the white supremacists. He condemned the white supremacists. He made that very clear. We have been litigating this. We litigated this 2 years ago, and Joe Biden has decided to resurrect it and again lie to the American people on that issue.
And the last thing I want to ask you about is a couple of years ago, you and your husband, Matt, a wonderful couple, I want to say. My personal experience with you is you're sweet, you're kind, you're helpful. You will do anything for somebody you like. And please say hello to him for me. But the New York Times called you the it conservative couple. He was, of course, before joining with the Trump forces, he was the head of the American Conservative Union. You told the New York Times most of your friends weren't talking to you anymore, meaning, I presume, your Republican friends were upset because there are a lot of true conservatives who think President Trump is not one of them at all. What do you say? Because their first issue, for example, is the debt and the deficit. What do you say to Republican women who may be jumping and voting for Joe Biden this time because of the size of the deficit? What do you say to them?
Well, I will say that, first of all, fortunately, I think since you've seen from 2016 to 2020, the president now has a record to run on. And you ask conservatives and you ask Republicans, and it's why the president has the highest percentage of support from the Republican Party and from those who are Republican. It's very clear. It's across the board. It's the highest that we've seen for almost any Republican president. So he has been able to really close that gap, bring Republicans back to the fold that were questioning whether he would be a Republican in nature when it comes to his issues. For us, when it comes to tax cuts, putting money back in the pockets of the middle class, really fighting for American jobs, bringing them back from China, being tough on China. He's been a winner on these issues. School choice, he's a champion of school choice. So for our issues, we feel he has made tremendous progress. There is no question that when you look at Joe Biden and you're talking about a $4 trillion tax burden on families, and when you look at each of his very massive, expensive programs, it would, of course, increase the debt and the deficit. This is something that we've all been trying to tackle for a long time. When you've looked at President Trump.
But let me get back, even before the pandemic, which now we have 30+ million people out of work in America, that doesn't speak to a great economy. Wall Street is in fine form because they look ahead to tax cuts and future profits, but the average American is in pretty bad shape right now. What do you say about his performance on the economy and the deficit and where they intertwine?
Well, look, this president was able to build a fundamentally strong economy for Blacks, Latinos, women, veterans. You're talking about historic unemployment numbers before the artificial interruption of COVID, which has impacted all of our lives. But what we know is that because of the president's policies, where he understands low taxes, renegotiating tough trade deals to bring jobs back, getting rid of job-killing regulations, all of those have been the ingredients in the formula to build a strong economy, which we did in the first place. You look at the August jobs report, you're talking about 1.4 million jobs created. That is historic.
As against 40 million lost. That's why Wall Street.
We have been able to recuperate. We've been able to recuperate over 40% of those jobs lost. Compare that to Joe Biden, that it was 2.5. That was 2.5 more times of jobs that we were able to create under President Trump than it took 2 years for Joe Biden. For Joe Biden and their economy, it was the weakest, the slowest recovery that we saw since the Great Depression. I think when you look at what President Trump has been able to do to jumpstart this economy again, get through COVID, which has obviously been very difficult, working with Democrats and Republicans to pass the Paycheck Protection Program that has benefited over 51 million jobs. That is important because we need those safeguards during this difficult time.
There's still not a third phase.
Exactly. And they've got, the Democrats have to come to the table.
And the Democrats say it's because the Republicans' support in that bill is not enough to help Americans in need.
No, because Schumer and Pelosi want to bail out these states and cities, and that's not going to happen. And so they got to come to the middle ground. We've been in Washington for a long time, and we know that they got to get to the point that they can negotiate a deal. And hopefully they can put the politics aside, get the economic stimulus package done again, provide more of these risk-free loans that I've visited these businesses that have been able to survive because of the Paycheck Protection Program. And you've seen that it's benefited a lot of women small business owners, a lot of minority small business owners. So I feel strongly that we will get through this, as a country. But the president who understands how to build a strong economy is a president. We cannot afford a second shutdown like Joe Biden is saying of this economy. We cannot afford more tax increases on middle-class families. He doesn't even understand how to handle China, which has been a global threat. And we know. All right,
last question, because you have to run, and even though we want you to stay.
We're having so much fun.
But Are your friends talking to you again?
Well, Bonnie, you're talking to me, so I think I'm in good shape here. No, yeah, actually, yes. I think what we've learned in this process is that, as we know, there's going to be Republicans, some of them that are never going to like Donald Trump. Could be for whatever reason they might not like him. I've worked with him. I've seen how he has empowered women advisors in the White House. I've been the one in the Oval Office in the room when there's been a bunch of guys and me where the president has looked at me and said, Mercedes, what do you think about this issue? And so I know my voice has been heard. I know many of those women who work there every single day, many of them, you know, some single, some married, some with kids, that they're there to serve this country, whether you're a Republican or a Democrat. I mean, Bonnie, we all do this.
But Mercy, you said you're the only woman in the room.
No,
if it had been the same meeting, the same level of advisors of the Obama administration, there would have been lots of, and you're Latina, your parents are from Cuba, that there would have been lots of women and lots of people of color in that room. You wouldn't have been the only woman in the room.
I would say I was in a lot of meetings in the Oval Office. There were plenty of women in the room. There, at some occasion, I might have been the only woman if there was 2 or 3 of us in the room. And you're being a little specific there. I think at the end of the day, what we know is that he has elevated such a large number of women in senior positions at the White House. We've had a strong voice, and ensuring that we're able to be involved in very complicated decision-making processes, whether it be on how do we be tough against China and on, how do we renegotiate these trade deals. Obviously, we've seen the impact of USMCA, what that meant for Mexico and Canada, where you had the Mexican president come and praise the president for the great work that they've done. You've seen the peace agreement, historic peace agreement between Israel and UAE. This was something that presidents couldn't accomplish for decades. And, you've seen the president move the embassy to Jerusalem, despite what critics were going to say. This man is a man of his word, and he basically laid out an agenda, and little by little, we've seen what he's been able to implement in terms of ensuring that we are able to build a strong economy, that women are able to benefit, and that we also can come together as a nation to combat coronavirus, get a vaccine, and make sure that we also get the therapeutics needed to combat this awful situation that we're all going through.
All right. Thank you so much, Mercy. Really enjoyed spending time with you.
Likewise.
And please come back.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Take care. Bye-bye. And joining me now are former Democratic Congresswoman Donna Edwards of Maryland. Hello, Donna.
Hi.
And Rina Shah, head of Republican Women for Biden.
Good to see you all.
Ladies, as you just saw, Mercedes Schlapp, a former panelist on To the Contrary, now a spokesperson for the Trump campaign, says that white women and women generally will go back into the Trump camp because he has a stronger outlook on security and issues that concern them. Donna, let's start with you. Your thoughts.
Well, I think that, whether you're looking at battleground state polling or national polling, it just simply doesn't reflect that. I mean, and where Trump has lost the most, frankly, is among white women, and particularly college-educated white women, many living in suburbs. And so, and I think it is precisely because they are not feeling secure. They're not feeling secure in their families with the way the pandemic has been conducted. They're not feeling secure in communities because of the way the president is dealing or not dealing with race relations. And so there are really good reasons that white women are really fleeing from Donald Trump. And I just don't think that, 40 plus days is going to be enough to regain that advantage.
And Rina, you deal all the time with Republican women, probably former Trump supporters in the first election in 2016. What are they thinking? Have you organized this group of Republican women for Biden?
Well, it's precisely to the point that Donna brought up, is that there is this block of women, which I fit into. Quite honestly, I live in a neighborhood in the Northern Virginia suburbs with a sidewalk, and I chose it because I could stroll a stroller down that sidewalk. And that's what I've been doing the past 5 years. I have two very young children. I'm going through, a lot of what I think young moms everywhere are experiencing, is that uncertainty of how do you balance everything in light of the COVID-19 pandemic and really lack of leadership. It seems like at every level, the president let the states do their own thing. Look, you know me, I'm a fan of limited government. I have been my entire life. But this was the one moment where the federal government could have given a unified response and dealt with this pandemic on our shores in a better way. By starting off calling it a hoax, I think the president, as Republican women have admitted to me, had a tremendous misstep. That was the wrong way to deal with it out of the gate. But beyond that, we are now at nearly 200,000 fellow Americans dead. And this is a very silent killer. I would be remiss if I didn't say that my demographic of women, we don't know which way to turn, because we feel that leadership in Washington has failed us for a very long time. But the Republican women I speak to, who are not like me, who voted for Trump in 2016, considering doing so again this fall, it is a very big task that I have taken on to try to get to the hearts and minds of these women and say to them that Joe Biden is not what the media has portrayed him to be. Even the mainstream media, I think, has not given him a fair shake. He was my favorite candidate coming out of the gate last fall. And I think, look, we have to talk to people. We have to talk to our neighbors about what's at stake here. And that's the economic future of our children and of ourselves, and then the public health.
Okay, thanks. And Donna, you talked about battleground states. Talk about some of the polling numbers there. They are tightening, right?
Well, I mean, it's to be expected. I've run for office before, and as you get closer to election day, people get more solidly grounded in terms of where they want to cast their votes. And so, yes, those battleground states are narrowing.
Which ones? Which ones are most important to the Biden campaign?
Well, I think it's the same ones, frankly, that are important to the Trump campaign. You've got Michigan, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Arizona, Florida. I think those in those states, the polls are tightening, but what you see there is that certain demographic groups who went more solidly for President Trump in 2016 are actually showing more strength, particularly among women, college-educated white women, but even among white men. Joe Biden seems to be closing that gap too. Obviously, he's not winning them, but anything that he shaves off of them is a plus sign in the Biden column. But I want to go back to the point that Rina was raising, which is that Joe Biden actually offers a vision for the future. It is not dark and dreary and chaotic. And I think that for women, all women, that's a good sign. Women want that stability. They want to know what the plan is for the future for themselves and their families. And I think that what you see in the Biden campaign is a reflection of that. While President Trump has been scrambling around, and really creating his own chaos, Joe Biden, every single week, he's putting out a plan and a vision for women, for the economy, around climate, around education, things that women care about for themselves and their families.
Rina, what about Republican women of color? What are you doing to try to get them to vote for Biden?
Well, I'll say this, Bonnie, in my many years of working in Republican politics on Capitol Hill and then off the Hill for 9 years now as a consultant, I've never been able to speak to Republican women as groups, as subgroups. It just has never happened because that's how they operate. They don't identify solely as Black women for Trump. This is a relatively new thing. I think this whole targeting very openly and directly, it was always an intention of the RNC, let me put it that way. But the bloc that's voted for Trump, they've capitalized on it. And those people are more proud than ever. I'm saying that the Trump administration routinely lies. And so if I'm going out there to speak to Black women about the economy, they're already lost to me, to be honest, because they have convinced themselves that this president created the policies that was why this economy was flourishing prior to COVID-19. They don't see that as Obama era policies that successfully worked over time and gifted this economy to Trump. But one big thing I want to mention, Bonnie, that just came out yesterday, The Hill, the media outlet, had an exclusive interview with Vice President Pence in which he admitted that the Trump campaign is focusing on Florida, Minnesota, and Arizona. And I find that interesting to me. I don't know that they're going to be able to push women in those states. I really don't think that these women are easily gaslit. I don't think they are the type that can take any more of the right-wing lies, to be frank. That's what's at play here. Daily gaslighting by the Trump administration. And we are smart enough to know that Joe Biden actually stands for women. He is somebody who has had so much to do with things that impact the lives of American women. Violence Against Women Act, we have that coming up soon, the anniversary. I mean, these are the reasons why Joe Biden gives me hope, and I think will take us out of a time where Trump has had us panicking about all the wrong things.
All right, well, I trust you both and really appreciate your contributions to this program. That's it for this edition of To the Contrary. Please visit our website, www.tothecontrary.org, and interact with us on Facebook and on Instagram. And whether you agree or think to the contrary, see you next week.
Funding for To the Contrary provided by the E. Rhodes and Leona B. Carpenter Foundation, the Colcom Foundation, and the Charles A. Frueauff Foundation. For a transcript or to see an online version of this episode of To the Contrary, please visit our PBS website at pbs.org/To the Contrary.